Suffolk, November 30th, 1814. The storm had been building since noon, which meant that by the time the Duke of Ashcairn's carriage reached the Dunfield Road, the sky had committed fully to the kind of weather that made sensible men postpone their journeys, and stubborn men regret not postponing theirs. The Duke was the second kind. He had been expected at Brindlecombe Hall by 4, and it was now 5:30, and the carriage had not moved in 20 minutes because the rear axle had dropped into a rut, the depth and permanence of which suggested it had been there since the Reformation and intended to remain. His coachman was in the rain. His valet was in the rain. 2 local men who had appeared from a farmhouse with the resigned helpfulness of people who had seen this rut before were also in the rain, and the Duke of Ashcairn was inside the carriage, dry and irritated, reading a letter he had already read twice, and thinking about the woman he had married 4 years ago, and the particular quality of silence that had settled between them in the last 18 months, the kind that wasn't peace and wasn't war, but was something more corrosive than either. The letter was from his wife. It had arrived that morning at Ashcairn Park, forwarded from London, and it was written in the hand he knew as well as his own, the hand that had once filled pages and now filled a single sheet with the economy of someone who had learned that saying less was safer than saying more. She had written to inform him that she would not be at Brindlecombe when he arrived. She had taken the children to her brother's house in Ipswich. She would return when the matter they had discussed in September was resolved, or when she had decided it could not be, whichever came first. The matter they had discussed in September. He read that line again. He set the letter on the seat beside him and looked at the rain on the carriage window and thought about September, and about the matter, and about the fact that his wife had reduced the central fracture of their marriage to a subordinate clause, and had left it there on a single sheet of paper for him to sit with in a broken carriage on a Suffolk road in November. The axle came free at 6. The carriage moved on through the dark and the rain, and the Duke arrived at Brindlecombe Hall at 7:15 to find the house lit and staffed and empty of anyone who belonged to him. His housekeeper, Mrs. Thurley, met him in the entrance hall with the composed sympathy of a woman who had been managing this household for 11 years and had seen the silences come and go and come again. "Her Grace departed yesterday morning, Your Grace. With the children." "Yes," he said. "I received the letter." He stood in the entrance hall of the house he had bought for his wife in the first year of their marriage, the house she had chosen because she loved Suffolk, and he had loved that she loved something with that kind of certainty. And he thought about all the things the letter did not say, which were far more important than the things it did. The matter they had discussed in September was this. She had discovered in August that the investment he had made the previous spring, the one he had told her was a railway speculation, was in fact a loan to his brother Cedric, who had gambling debts of a size and character that would, if known, ruin the family's standing in 3 counties. She had discovered this not because he had told her, but because she had found the solicitor's correspondence in his study, which she had entered looking for the household accounts, which he had also not provided when promised, which was its own smaller betrayal inside the larger one. She had confronted him in September. He had explained. He had explained with the fluency of a man who believed his reasons were sufficient, and who had spent 4 years assuming that sufficient reasons were the same as honest ones. He had told her it was a family matter. He had told her it was not her concern. He had told her, with the particular confidence of a man who had never been wrong in a way that cost him anything, that she needed to trust his judgment and leave the finances to him. She had looked at him across the breakfast table in the September morning light and said, "I have trusted your judgment for 4 years. Your judgment has lied to me twice that I know of, and I suspect more than twice." And he had said, with the words he would spend the next 2 months trying to unsay, "That is not your place, Seren. The finances of this family are my responsibility. Your place is the household, the children, and the life I have provided for you. And I would ask you to remember that before you accuse me of things you do not fully understand." She had not raised her voice. She had not wept. She had not thrown the correspondence at him, though it was on the table between them, and the impulse, he would later understand, must have been considerable. She had set her napkin beside her plate with a deliberateness that contained everything she was choosing not to say, a gesture so controlled and so precise that it functioned as a complete statement. The careful folding of the linen, the placement exactly parallel to the plate edge, the withdrawal of her hands to her lap. It was the gesture of a woman who had decided that the argument was not worth having, not because she was wrong, but because the man across from her had revealed that he was not yet capable of hearing what she would say. The napkin said what a shout would have ruined. "I am not going to fight you. I am going to leave this room with everything I understand about you intact, and you will sit here and not know what you have lost until much later." She had said very quietly, "I understand completely, William. I understand that you have decided what I am allowed to know. I understand that you believe this is protection, and I understand that it is not." Then she had stood and pressed her chair in with both hands and left the breakfast room and closed the door with the care of someone who was not slamming it on principle, and he had sat with his coffee and his sufficient reasons and had not understood, not yet, not for weeks, that the door she had closed was not the one made of wood. That had been September. It was now November, and the carriage had stalled in the storm, and the letter was on the seat, and the house was empty, and the Duke of Ashcairn was beginning to understand, with the slowness of a man who had never been required to understand anything quickly, that his wife had not left in anger. She had left in clarity, and clarity, he was discovering, was a great deal harder to argue with. He did not go after her. This was not nobility or strategy. It was the paralysis of a man who had spent his entire adult life being certain and was now not certain of the correct next step, a condition he had no practice in and no tolerance for. He wrote to her on the second day. The letter took 4 drafts. The first was an explanation. The second was a justification. The third was an apology that was mostly an explanation wearing different clothes, and he recognized this halfway through the second paragraph and stopped writing and set down the pen and thought, for the first time in his marriage with genuine honesty, "I do not know how to speak to her without managing her." It was an ugly thought. He sat with it for a long time. He wrote the 4th draft. It said, "Seren, I am at Brindlecombe. The house is as you left it. I would like to speak with you when you are willing. I will wait. Ashcairn." He sent it and thought it was honest. He was half right. The waiting was honest. The rest was still a man deciding the terms. Her reply came 4 days later, carried by her brother's man, who had ridden from Ipswich in the cold, and who delivered the letter with the neutral expression of a person who had been told nothing and had concluded everything. It was 3 lines. "I will return to Brindlecombe on the 20th of November. I will bring the children. We will speak then." The 20th was 9 days away. He read the 3 lines and thought about what a man was supposed to do with 9 days when the person he needed to speak to had decided the timing and the terms and the distance, and all he had decided was that he would wait. Not a decision at all, but merely the absence of a better one. On the 3rd day of waiting, he rode out to the eastern boundary of the Brindlecombe land, where the tenant farms ran along the River Deben under the gray November sky. He had not ridden this part of the estate in over a year. Serene rode it every week. He knew this because Mrs. Thurley had mentioned it with the careful indirection of a housekeeper who wanted him to understand something without being the one to say it, and because the tenants he passed raised their hats with the warmth of people who knew someone from this household and were surprised to discover it was him. He stopped at the Gravesend farm, where old Josiah Gravesend came out, and looked at him with the polite confusion of a man receiving an unexpected visit from a landlord he had not spoken to in 2 years. "Her Grace usually calls on Thursdays," Gravesend said, and the sentence contained an entire accounting of the marriage the Duke had not been paying attention to. He rode home in the late afternoon and sat in the study and opened the household ledger his wife kept, the one she had asked him for in August, the one whose absence had sent her into his study and into the truth, and he read it from the first page and found in her handwriting the complete record of a woman who had been running his estate with a precision and devotion he had never once acknowledged, because he had never once looked. He closed the ledger. He sat in the study in the November dark and thought about the word place, and about what he had meant by it, and about what she had heard, and about the distance between those two things, which was the exact shape and size of everything he had failed to see. She returned on the 20th, as promised. The carriage came up the Brindlecombe Drive at 2:30 in the afternoon, and the Duke watched it from the study window with the stillness of a man who had rehearsed this moment for 9 days and had not arrived at a version of it that satisfied him. The children came out first: Arabella, who was 3, and Edmund, who was 5, and who looked at his father across the entrance hall with the cautious appraisal of a boy who had been told they were visiting and had understood, in the way children understand things they are not told, that visiting was not quite the word. Then Seren. She stepped down from the carriage in a traveling coat he did not recognize, dark gray, well-made, and she walked into the entrance hall with the composure of a woman returning to a house she had left on her own terms and intended to remain in on her own terms, and neither of those sets of terms had been discussed with him. "William," she said. "Seren," he said. The children were taken upstairs by the nursemaid, and they stood in the entrance hall 6 feet apart, in the house he had bought for her, and neither of them moved to close the distance. "I read the ledger," he said. Something moved in her expression. Not surprise, something closer to the recognition of a thing she had been waiting to hear, without knowing she had been waiting for it. "Which ledger?" she said. "The household accounts. Your accounts." He paused. "All of them, from the first year." She was quiet for a moment. "And what did you find?" "I found that I didn't know what you were doing," he said. "In this house, on this estate, with the tenants. I did not know, because I did not look." She held his gaze. The entrance hall was quiet around them. The November light came through the tall windows, and neither of them had taken off their coats, which meant neither of them had decided what this was yet. "That is a beginning," she said. "It is not a conversation. Come and find me when you are ready for the conversation." She walked past him toward the staircase, and he stood and watched her go, and thought about the napkin in September, and the door she had closed, and the way she had just walked past him without anger and without warmth, with something more unsettling than either, which was the patient clarity of a woman who was no longer waiting for him to understand. She had moved past waiting. She was now observing whether he would arrive on his own. On the 3rd morning, the Deben flooded. It was not a catastrophic flood. It was the seasonal rise the river produced in wet Novembers, manageable if the drainage channels were maintained, dangerous if they were not. Seren knew which channels needed clearing because she had walked them in October. She knew which tenant farms were at risk because she had spoken to the tenants. She knew the name of every family on the eastern boundary, and the condition of every cottage roof, and the precise location where the river had breached 2 years ago and been repaired with temporary work that she had requested be replaced and that the estate steward hadn't replaced. The Duke knew none of this. She was in the morning room when word came from the Gravesend farm that the water was rising. She stood from the desk and said to Mrs. Thurley, "Send word to Mr. Hollis to meet me at the eastern boundary with the drainage maps, and have the stable prepare the cart with sandbags and timber." She said this with the authority of someone who had done it before, and Mrs. Thurley moved with the speed of someone who had received these instructions before, and the Duke, who was in the hallway and had heard all of it, stood in the doorway and said, "What can I do?" She looked at him. It was the first time since her return that she had looked at him with something other than composed distance, and what he saw was not warmth, but the brief professional assessment of a woman deciding whether an available resource was useful. "Can you lift sandbags?" she said. "Yes," he said. "Then come, and wear the old coat." They worked the eastern boundary for 6 hours. The Duke of Ashcairn carried sandbags alongside 3 tenant farmers and a man named Pecci, who had 1 working arm and more practical knowledge of the Deben than anyone in the county. Seren directed the operation from the bank, with the drainage map spread on the cart tailgate and Mr. Hollis beside her, and she made decisions about where to reinforce and where to redirect, with the speed of a woman who had studied this river and this land with the seriousness he brought to his parliamentary correspondence, which was the seriousness reserved for things he considered important, and which she had brought to everything he had dismissed as beneath his attention. He watched her across the flooded field in the November rain, directing the defense of land that was technically his and in every practical sense hers, and he thought, "I told this woman her place was the household. I was standing inside her place and did not recognize it because I had never looked down." At 4, when the water had been turned and old Josiah Gravesend had shaken Seren's hand and said, "We are grateful." "Your Grace," as he always did, they walked back toward the house in the wet November dusk. His coat was soaked, and his boots were ruined, and his arms ached, and he had not felt this useful in his own home in 4 years. She walked beside him. Not the corrosive silence of the last 18 months, something different. The silence of 2 people who had just done something together, and were both aware that the doing had shifted the air between them. "You knew exactly what to do," he said. "Every November since we have lived here," she said. "You were in London." The sentence sat between them with the weight of everything it contained, which was not an accusation, but an accounting. "I should not have been in London," he said. Her gaze went to the path ahead. "The channels on the North Bend need rebuilding before December," she said. "The temporary repair will not hold another season." "I will speak to Hollis," he said. "Speak to me," she said. "I know where the problem is. Hollis does not." He watched her. She was not asking for permission. She was stating a fact about who knew what, and waiting to see whether he was capable of hearing it. "Then I will speak to you," he said. She glanced at him. The glance lasted half a second longer than practical, and then she looked ahead, and they walked the rest of the way in the silence that was not corrosive, but was not yet warm, the one that contained within it the possibility of something she was not ready to name, and he was not yet qualified to ask for. The county noticed, because Suffolk was a county that noticed, not with the sharpness of London, where gossip was currency, and moved at the speed of ambition, but with the slower, more thorough attention of a community that had known its families for generations and kept its observations in a ledger that was never written down, but never forgotten. The first indication that the neighborhood was watching came at the autumn dinner at Thornham House, which Lady Elspeth Crail hosted every November with the determination of a woman who would not allow Suffolk mud to interfere with a social calendar she had been perfecting since 1802. 14 people. The Ashcairns, the Crails, the Fenwoods from Aldeburgh, Sir Parcival Don, who was 70, and deaf in one ear and kind in both, and the Hadley family, whose son Marcus had recently returned from the Navy and was seated beside Seren with the transparent maneuvering of a hostess who believed a young naval officer was interesting company for any woman, regardless of whether the woman was married to a duke. Seren managed the table with the ease she brought to all rooms, the conversation moving where she directed it, the awkward silences filled before they became awkward, the young Hadley boy drawn out on the subject of the Baltic convoys, which he knew well and spoke about with the enthusiasm of someone who had not yet learned that enthusiasm was unfashionable. The Duke watched this from 4 places away. He watched her listen to the boy with genuine attention. He watched her turn the conversation toward Lady Crail when Lady Crail's expression suggested she felt neglected, and then bring it back to Sir Parzival, who had been trying to tell a story about the Deben flood of 1798 and had been interrupted twice. He watched all of this with the attention of a man who was seeing his wife operate in a room for the first time, though she had been operating in rooms for the entirety of their marriage, and the recognition of what he had failed to notice sat in him like the ledger had, another record of competence he had not bothered to read. Lady Crail found him after dinner in the drawing room, while Seren was at the piano playing something she had learned as a girl and had never stopped practicing, a fact he knew because the piano at Brindlecombe showed the wear of daily use, another thing he had not noticed until November. "She is in good spirits," Lady Crail said with calibrated neutrality, probing without appearing to probe. "The Suffolk air agrees with her." "It does," he said. Lady Crail looked at him with the direct assessment of a woman who had known his family for 30 years and had watched him grow from a boy who broke fences into a man who broke other things. "You have been here 3 weeks," she said. "That is longer than you have spent at Brindlecombe in any single visit since the first year." "The estate requires attention," he said. Lady Crail smiled. "The estate," she said, "has had excellent attention for some time. It is not the estate that requires your presence, your grace." He looked at her. She held his gaze with the serenity of someone who had said exactly what she intended to say and was not going to soften it. "Her brother," she continued, "Trevane. He wrote to Sir Parzival last month. They are old friends from Cambridge." She paused. He did not write about the visit. He wrote about his sister. He said she arrived at his house with 2 children and a single trunk, and the composure of a woman who had made a decision and was not going to discuss it. She looked at the Duke steadily. "A single trunk, Your Grace. 1 trunk means she intends to return. Everything packed means she does not." He was quiet for a moment. He looked across the room at Seren, who was finishing the piece at the piano and accepting a compliment from Sir Parzival with the warmth she gave to people who meant what they said. And he thought about the single trunk, and about what it meant that she had packed to return, and about what it meant that she had left at all, and about the distance between those 2 decisions, which was the space in which his marriage either survived or did not. "She packed to return," he said quietly. "She packed," Lady Crail said, "to make a point. The point has been made. What you do with it is not my concern, but I am fond of her, and I am fond of you in the way one is fond of difficult things one has known a long time, and I would prefer not to watch you lose her through the particular blindness of a man who assumes that what he does not see does not exist." She patted his arm with the brisk affection of a woman concluding a conversation she had been planning for 3 weeks, and left him standing in the drawing room with the sound of his wife's piano and the weight of a sentence he was going to carry for some time. A single trunk. She had packed to return. She had left to be seen, not to disappear. He looked across the room. Seren was talking with Mrs. Fenwood now, and she was not looking at him, and he understood that the not looking was deliberate, and that the deliberateness was its own form of communication. The same language as the napkin, and the closed door, and the 3-line letter. The language of someone who had said everything she intended to say, and was waiting, with a patience that was not infinite, but was considerable, for him to hear it. The attack came at the Christmas assembly at Thornham, which Lady Crail hosted every year on the 23rd of December, with the conviction that Christmas Eve was for family, and the 23rd was for the county. 30 people. The full Suffolk circle, expanded for the season. The Duke and Seren arrived together, which was noted because the county had been noting things about the Ashcairns since November. Seren wore a dress the color of winter chestnuts, and moved through the room with the ease the Duke had learned to watch for, the way she read a room, the way he read a parliamentary brief, identifying the currents and the risks in the first 30 seconds. Cedric was there. The Duke's brother had arrived from London 2 days prior, unannounced, with the casual presumption of someone who considered family houses extensions of his own convenience. Cedric found Seren at the refreshment table midway through the evening. The Duke was across the room with Sir Parzival. He did not see Cedric approach. He did not hear what was said. He heard the silence that followed. Rooms have a sound when they are operating normally, and rooms have a different sound when something has happened, a brief contraction, a held breath. The Duke heard the second sound and turned. Cedric was standing in front of Seren with the expression of someone who had said something he considered charming. 4 people were within hearing. Seren's expression was the one the Duke had seen once before, in September. The controlled stillness that preceded the napkin. He crossed the room. He did not hurry. He arrived at Seren's side and said, "Cedric." His brother turned. "William, I was just telling your wife that she has done remarkable things with Brindlecombe. Quite the little enterprise she has built." The word little did the work it was designed to do. In a different voice, it was a modifier. In Cedric's voice, with Cedric's smile, in front of 4 people who understood the grammar of condescension, it was a reduction. It said, "She is playing at something that is not hers." The Duke looked at his brother with the full weight of someone who had spent 2 months discovering the scope of what his wife had built, and who understood exactly what the word little meant when applied to it by a man whose gambling debts she had been unknowingly financing. "Brindlecombe," the Duke said, in the voice that was not the drawing room voice, but the one underneath, the one that carried the title and knew it, "has been managed by my wife for 4 years, with a competence I am only now beginning to properly account for. The eastern tenants, the drainage, the household accounts, the winter provisions, the repairs I should have authorized, and did not. All of it done, and done well, and done by her. I would ask you to choose your words with the same care she has brought to the work." Cedric's smile underwent rapid recalibration. He said something about meaning no offense, which was what people said when they had meant precisely the offense they were retreating from, and found someone else to talk to. Seren stood beside the Duke in the aftermath. She did not look at him. "What did he say?" the Duke said quietly. "Before I arrived. He said he supposed I had been keeping myself busy, while you attended to the real affairs of the family." She paused. He said it with a smile. The smile was the worst part. "He will apologize to you," the Duke said. Seren looked at him then, with the expression he had been learning since November, the look of a woman who had just been defended by a man she was not yet sure she could trust, trying to reconcile the defense with everything that preceded it. "He does not need to apologize," she said. "You have said what needed saying." She paused. "It is the first time you have said publicly what I am worth to this house." The sentence landed in him with the weight of something he would carry for a long time. Lady Crail appeared at Seren's elbow within 3 minutes, which was the response time of a woman who had been monitoring from across the room. He corrected his brother, Seren said before Lady Crail could speak. He corrected his brother, Lady Crail agreed, by listing every contribution you have made in 4 years, in a voice that carried to half the room, in front of people who will tell the other half by tomorrow. That is not a correction. That is a declaration. Seren looked at her wine. "He has been different since November," Lady Crail said. "Since the flood. Since you made him carry sandbags like a tenant farmer." "I did not make him," Seren said. "I asked if he could. He said yes. The distinction matters." "You are not ready to forgive him," Lady Crail said. Seren looked across the room at the Duke, who was back in conversation, and was not looking at her, and was, she understood, aware of exactly where she was. "I am not ready to trust him," she said. "Forgiveness is simple. Trust requires evidence over time, and time is the thing he has not yet given me enough of." Lady Crail did not offer reassurance. She stood beside Seren with the companionable silence of someone who understood that some things required witnessing rather than commentary. "The napkin," Seren said quietly. "In September, when he told me my place, I folded my napkin and left the room. It was the only honest thing I could do that would not destroy something." She paused. "He has not mentioned it. I do not know if he understood it." "He understood it," Lady Crail said. "He may not have the language for it yet. But a man who crosses a room to defend the work you have done in his house is a man who has been thinking about a napkin, whether he knows it or not." Christmas Day was quiet. The children opened their gifts in the morning room, and Arabella fell asleep in the Duke's lap at noon, which was the first time she had done that since before September. And the Duke sat with his sleeping daughter and looked at his wife across the room and thought about everything he wanted to say and could not say in front of the children. On the 26th, he found her at the desk in the morning room. She was writing to Mr. Hollis about the North Bend channels. He stood in the doorway and watched her write before she looked up. "I need to speak with you," he said. She set down the pen. She did not arrange her expression. She simply looked at him with the steady attention of someone who had been waiting for this. He came in. He did not sit behind the desk opposite her. He sat in the chair beside the fire, the children's chair, which was lower than hers, and whether he chose it deliberately or not, the geometry placed him looking up at her, and she noticed this, and he saw her notice. "The lie about Cedric's debts," he said. "I told you it was a railway investment because I believed you did not need to know. I believed I was protecting the family." He paused. "I was protecting myself. I was protecting my judgment from your scrutiny because I think I knew even then, that your scrutiny would find it inadequate." She did not speak. "In September," he said, "when you confronted me, I said it was not your place." The word place sat in the room with the accumulated weight of 4 months. I said it because I was afraid, not of you, of what it meant that you were right. If you were right about the debts, you were right about the judgment. And if you were right about the judgment, then the version of this marriage in which I make the decisions and you manage the household was not a partnership. It was an arrangement I had constructed to avoid being accountable to someone whose opinion I was not confident I could meet. He turned to the fire. He turned back to her. "The napkin," he said. She went still. "In September, when you folded the napkin and left. I have thought about it every day since November. It said, I am not going to fight you, because fighting you would require you to be capable of hearing me, and you are not. And I will not diminish what I know by offering it to someone who has told me it is not my place to know it." He paused. "It was the most precise thing anyone has ever done in my presence." Seren looked at his hands, which were on his knees, open. She looked at his face, which had nothing managed in it, just a man sitting in a low chair telling his wife he had been wrong about the architecture of their entire marriage. "William," she said. "I did not leave because of Cedric's debts," she said. "I left because when I told you the truth, you told me it was not my place to know it. You made the truth a territory I was not allowed to enter. And a marriage in which one person decides what the other is allowed to know is not a marriage. It is a management." "I packed one trunk," she said. He was quiet. "I packed one trunk because I intended to come back. I left because I needed you to understand what this house is without me in it. Not the meals and the tenants and the ledger, though those matter. What this house is without a person in it who tells you the truth." She paused. "You have been living without the truth for 4 years, William. Not because I did not offer it, but because you did not want it from me. You wanted it from your own judgment, which is a different thing entirely." His gaze dropped to the floor. He took in the morning room, at the desk where she worked, at the ledger beside the correspondence, at the domestic architecture of a life she had built inside his title and his house and his name, built with a competence he had never examined, and a devotion he had never earned, and a patience he had very nearly exhausted. "I want it from you," he said. "The truth. I want it from you, and I understand that wanting it now, after 4 years of not wanting it, is not sufficient. I understand that trust requires evidence and time. I am asking whether there is still time." "There is still time," she said. "But time is not a promise. Time is a condition. And the condition is that from this point forward, everything about this family, the debts, the decisions, the accounts, the brother, everything is mine to know. Not because I demand it, but because a marriage in which one person is kept outside the truth is a marriage in which that person is kept outside the marriage. Those are my terms," she said. "I accept your terms," he said. She picked up her pen. "The North Bend channels," she said. "I need an answer from Hollis by Friday. If you are speaking to him, tell him Friday." She was writing again. She had accepted his terms and set her own and returned to the drainage channels, which told him, if he was reading correctly, that the conversation was not finished, but paused, and the pause was permission, and the drainage channels were the language in which she was saying, "I believe you. Now prove it. I will tell him Friday," he said. "Good," she said without looking up. Without. He left the morning room and stood in the hallway, and the door was closed, but it was not the September door. It was a door closed because a woman was working behind it and would open it when she was ready, and readiness was hers to determine. January came with the hard frost. Seren's decisions held. The North Bend channels performed exactly as she had designed. The Gravesend farm stayed dry. Mr. Hollis, who had managed the estate for 9 years with complacent adequacy, found himself being seriously questioned, and the questions came from the Duchess and were a good deal more specific than any he had received from the Duke. The household accounts were opened. It was a Tuesday morning, and Seren came into the study and set the estate ledger and the investment correspondence and the solicitor's file on the desk and said, "Show me everything." He showed her everything: the Cedric debts, the full extent, the railway investments, the London property, the mortgage on Ashcairn Park, which she had not known about and which he had taken out 3 years ago to cover the first round of Cedric's debts, the round she had not discovered because he had hidden it better. She read it all with the speed and precision he had seen her bring to the drainage maps, and she asked questions that revealed an understanding of finance he had not known she possessed, because he had never asked, because assuming was the foundational error from which all other errors had followed. When she finished, she closed the solicitor's file and looked at him across the desk. "The mortgage," she said. That was the first lie. "Yes." "And Cedric." "Yes." She was quiet for a moment. "How much of my dowry remains?" he told her. It was not the answer she wanted. She turned to the window. She studied the Suffolk winter outside it, the frozen landscape, the tenant farms in the distance, the world she had been maintaining while her husband dismantled their financial position from London with the confident incompetence of someone who had never been told no by anyone qualified to say it. "We will recover it," she said. "Not because I have forgiven the loss, but because the children will need it, and because I am better at this than you are, and because you know that now, and knowing it is the beginning of something I can work with." "Yes," he said. "I know it." She nodded. She picked up the solicitor's file. "I will write to Mr. Caulfield this afternoon. The mortgage terms can be renegotiated if we approach it before March." She looked at him. "I will need your signature on the correspondence, not your permission." "Your signature," he held her gaze. He thought about the word permission, and about the word signature, and about the distance between them, the distance between control and cooperation. And he understood that she had chosen the word deliberately, the way she chose everything, and that the choice was a test and an offer at the same time. You have it, he said. She stood. She gathered the files with the efficiency of a woman beginning a project she intended to complete, and she walked to the door, and she paused with her hand on the frame. William, she said without turning. Yes. The napkin, she said. You understood it. She did not phrase it as a question. Yes, he said. I understood it. She was quiet for a moment. Her hand was on the doorframe, and her back was to him, and the January light was coming through the study window and falling across the desk where the truth of their marriage had just been laid out and examined, and neither of them had flinched from it. Good, she said. That matters. She left the room. He sat at the desk and thought about all the versions of the napkin, the one in September that said, I am leaving, and the one just now, in the doorway, that said something else, something he was going to think about for the rest of the afternoon, which was, I see that you see me. That is not forgiveness, but it is the door opening. February brought the thaw, and with it the loosening of everything that had been frozen, the ground and the river, and the something between them that had been held in careful suspension. She had begun leaving the morning room door open. This was not a dramatic gesture. It was a Tuesday, and then a Wednesday, and then it was simply the condition of the room, the door open, the desk visible from the hallway, the sound of her pen audible to anyone who walked past, which the Duke did with a frequency that was not accidental, and that Seren did not discourage. On a Thursday morning in February, he walked past the open door, and she said, without looking up, Come in. I need your opinion on the Aldeburgh Road. He sat in the low chair by the fire, which had become, without either of them naming it, his chair in her room. She showed him the road proposal. He gave his opinion. She disagreed with part of it. He revised. She accepted the revision with the brief nod of a woman receiving adequate work, and they talked about the road for 20 minutes, and then about the spring planting, and then about Edmund's tutor, and then about nothing, the conversation simply continuing with the ease of two people who had remembered how to be in the same room without managing the experience. She was looking at the planting schedule when she said, I have been thinking about the assembly, when Cedric said what he said. You crossed the room. You did not need to. I have been managing rooms since I was 16. I had a response prepared. You spoke before I could deliver it. Was that an objection? He said. It was an observation, she said. I have spent my marriage being capable in rooms where no one noticed. You noticed, and you said it aloud, in front of people. She paused. I was angry about it for 3 days. Angry, he said, because I didn't need you to defend me, and because the fact that you did, the specific quality of what you said, was the first time I believed you might actually see what I see. Not the drainage. Those are evidence. This was different. This was you understanding what it costs to build something inside a house where the person who owns it does not know you are building it. She met his gaze, and I was angry, because believing that made everything harder. It is simpler to be right and unacknowledged. It is far more complicated to be right and seen. Seren, he said. I am not going to ask you to forgive me, he said. Forgiveness is your decision and your timing, and I have learned, slowly and badly, that your timing is better than mine. I am going to ask you something else. She waited. The morning room was quiet. The February light came through the windows, and the door was open. And somewhere in the house the children were with the nursemaid, and the house was running as it had always run, because she made it run. And he knew this now, and she knew he knew, and the knowing was between them like the napkin had been, a precise thing that meant everything. I would like to be your partner, he said, not in the way I meant it before, which was not partnership but supervision dressed as affection. I would like to be the person who sits in this room and works beside you and disagrees with you about the road and revises when you are right, which is frequently. And I would like to do this, not because I owe it to you, though I do, but because the version of this marriage in which you are fully present and fully known is the only version I am interested in anymore. She held his gaze for a long time. She set down the planting schedule. She walked to the chair where he sat. She placed her hand on the arm of the chair, not on his hand, on the wood beside his wrist, close enough that the warmth was present without the touch, the exact distance between what she wanted and what she was ready for. The accounts, she said, the mortgage, the brother, the estate. All of it, he said. And if I disagree with your judgment, then I will listen. And if your judgment is better, I will follow it. And if I am wrong, I will say so. She looked at him. The corner of her mouth did something he had not seen since before September. Not a smile, the beginning of the possibility of one. You have been sitting in that chair for 2 months, she said. It is a good chair, he said. It is the children's chair, she said. I know, he said. The almost smile, closer this time. He could see it building like the thaw outside. Stay in the chair, she said. I will get tea. We have the Aldeburgh Road, and the spring planting, and the Ipswich solicitor to discuss. She walked to the door and stopped at the frame. She put her hand on it the way she had in January, the same gesture, the same pause, but she turned this time. She looked at him in the low chair with the February light and the open door. William, she said. Seren, he said. She looked at him for 1 moment longer than the practical register required, and the moment contained everything she had not said since September, and was beginning to consider saying, and the consideration was its own kind of arrival. The tea will be 5 minutes, she said. She left the room. The door stayed open. He sat in the low chair and looked at the open door and thought about the napkin, the first one in September, the one that said, I am leaving. And about the door she had just walked through, the open one, the one that said, I am not leaving. I am getting tea. I will return. And the distance between those 2 gestures was the entire distance of his marriage. And he had walked it badly and slowly, and was still walking it. And she was ahead of him, as she had always been. And she was waiting, not with patience exactly, but with the willingness of a woman who had decided that the man behind her was worth the wait, which was not forgiveness, and was not trust, and was something that came before both and made both possible. She came back with the tea. She poured 2 cups. She set his on the chair arm and sat at the desk and opened the road proposal and said, the drainage on the eastern stretch is inadequate, which is obvious if you have walked the road after a November rain, which you have now done, so I expect your opinion will be different than it was 20 minutes ago. It is, he said. Good, she said. And the morning continued. And the door stayed open. And the tea was strong, and the argument about the Aldeburgh Road was genuine and productive, and resolved in her favor, which she accepted without commentary, because commentary was unnecessary when the evidence spoke for itself. Spring came to Suffolk as an accumulation, the ground softening, the river settling. The Brindlecombe estate moved into the planting season under Seren's direction, but with the Duke's visible participation, which the county noted with quiet satisfaction. He was in the fields 3 mornings a week. He rode the tenant rounds on Thursdays, which had been her day and was now theirs. Edmund's tutor was replaced by a young man named Fairholme from Cambridge, whom Seren had found and the Duke had approved, and the exchange had the quality of a conversation between 2 people arriving at the same conclusion from different directions. Lady Crail called in March. She sat in the morning room and looked at the open door and the 2 cups on the desk and the planting schedule with notes in 2 different hands. The door is open, Lady Crail said. Since February, Seren said. And the man, in the fields, Thursdays. He rides the tenants now. Lady Crail held her cup. You have not told me whether you have forgiven him. Seren looked at the window. "I have not forgiven him," she said. "I have something better. I have evidence." "He sits in the low chair," she said. "The children's chair. He chose it in December. He continues to choose it. Every morning he comes into this room and sits below my eye line and asks what needs doing and does it." She looked at Lady Crail. "Forgiveness is a feeling. Evidence is a pattern. I trust patterns." Lady Crail set down her cup with the expression of a woman who had just heard the most precise description of love she had encountered in 40 years of watching marriages. "The Aldeburgh Assembly is on the 14th, Lady Crail said. "Wear the chestnut dress." She left. Seren sat at the desk and thought about evidence and patterns, and a man who chose a chair every morning and did not know, or perhaps did know, that the choosing was the most eloquent thing he had ever said to her. The Aldeburgh Assembly was on a Saturday in April, and Seren wore the chestnut dress. The Duke arrived beside her and said, "The chestnut." "Lady Crail's recommendation," Seren said. It was the right recommendation, he said, and the way he said it had nothing of the drawing room in it, and everything of the morning room. They moved through the assembly together. Something new, something noted. The habit of two people who had discovered they worked better in the same room and had stopped pretending otherwise. Cedric was not there. He had returned to London in January and had not come back. Noted with relief. At the end of the evening, in the entrance hall, in the 30 seconds when no one was watching because everyone was finding their coats, the Duke said, "Seren, I would like to take you home, and when we are home, I would like to tell you something I've been thinking about since December." "Tell me now," she said. He glanced around the entrance hall. There were people within hearing. "Tell me now," she said again. "I have spent 5 months listening to you say things in rooms where no one could hear. Say this one where they can." He took her hand. Not the formal hand-on-arm of a duke escorting a duchess. Her hand. He held it and looked at her, with people beginning to notice, and coats being found, and the April evening waiting outside. "I've been wrong," he said, in a voice that was not raised, but wasn't lowered either, the voice that carried exactly as far as truth required. "I have been wrong about what this marriage is and who you are in it, and I have spent 5 months learning what you built, while I was not watching, and I want you to know, and I want this room to know, that the woman I married is the reason my house stands, and my children thrive, and my tenants trust this family. And I did not see it, and I see it now, and I will not stop seeing it." The entrance hall had gone quiet. Coats were held mid-arm, conversations suspended. The county of Suffolk, which had been watching since November, was now witnessing, and there was a difference between the two, and the difference was that witnessing required the thing being observed to matter, and it did, and everyone in the room understood that it did. Seren's gaze moved from his eyes to his hand, around hers to his face, which had nothing of September in it. Nothing of the man who had sat in a broken carriage, reading a letter from a wife he had failed to know. Just this, just him, entirely present, entirely accountable, saying in a public room what he should have known in a private one from the very beginning. She did not fold a napkin. She did not close a door. She did not pack a trunk. She turned her hand inside his and held it back. The smallest gesture, the closing of fingers, the decision to grip rather than be gripped, and it said everything the napkin had been waiting to unsay since September. "I see you. I'm not leaving. I'm holding on. Take me home," she said. "We have the morning room and the spring planting, and I believe the tea is already laid." They rode home to Brindlecombe in the April dark. The children were asleep. Mrs. Thurley had laid the tea in the morning room because Mrs. Thurley understood what was required without being told. They sat. She at the desk, he in the low chair, the door open, the tea strong, the planting schedule between them, and the Ipswich correspondence, and the life they were rebuilding inside the structure she had never let fall. She picked up her pen. She began writing to the solicitor. He watched her write. He thought about the napkin in September, folded beside the plate with the precision of a woman leaving a room she would not return to on the same terms. He thought about the hand in the entrance hall, the fingers closing around his, the precision of a woman choosing to remain. The same hands, the same precision, a different decision. He thought about the word place, the word that had started everything, the word he had used in September like a wall and she had heard like a door closing. He thought about what the word meant now, in this room, with this woman at this desk, with the door open and the children upstairs, and the estate running, and the accounts transparent, and the truth between them like the planting schedule, a working document, revised and annotated in 2 hands. Her place was the morning room, and the tenant rounds, and the drainage channels, and the accounts, and the Aldeburgh Road, and the decisions that kept the house standing. His place was the low chair. He understood this now. He understood that the low chair was not a penance, but a position. The position of a man who had learned where to sit in order to see clearly, and that seeing clearly was not a diminishment, but the first accurate view he had been offered in 4 years. And the view was of a woman who had known her worth the entire time, and had simply been waiting for him to arrive at the same conclusion. "William," she said without looking up. "Yes," he said. "The tea is getting cold," she said. He picked up his cup. He drank the tea. It was strong and exactly right, the way it always was in this room, the way she insisted on it, the way she would continue to insist on it. In this room, with the open door, and the low chair, and the morning light that would come tomorrow and the morning after that, and all the mornings that followed, in which the evidence would continue to accumulate, and the pattern would hold, and the napkin would remain in the drawer where it belonged, folded and finished, the record of a woman who had known her worth before he did, and had waited, with a patience that was not infinite, but was enough for him to learn it too.